Texas. Key facts. Abbreviation TX. Nickname the Lone Star State. Capital Austin. Flower bluebonnet. Tree pecan. Bird mockingbird. Cooking implement Dutch oven. Motto friendship before statehood. This entry is big, for Texas is big. Texas is very big. Everyone knows that. Nonetheless, the Lone Star State likes to remind itself of this at all times. Commercials on TV and advertising holdings talk of Texans' eyes serving of beef. Enough space in the trunk of this car even for a Texan. Only one toilet paper is big enough for Texans, and so on. If ever a place mythologizes itself, that place is Texas. With its size, the tendency to self-mythologize its iconography, its accent, its props, its cuisine, and its history, Texas is able and willing to think of itself as a land of pot more than any other state in the Union. As a whole other country is the current state slogan. The Republic of Texas was a sovereign nation for the best part of 10 years in the 19th century. Its embassy in London was in St. James's, and it remains memorialized to these days by a cantina restaurant just off Trafalgar Square called the Texas Embassy. When Mexico won its independence from Spain in 1821, it immediately claimed those lands we know today as Texas. Over the succeeding years, European settlers and landowners, led by Steve Austin and Sam Houston, whose names live on in Texas's capital and largest city respectively, prepared to secede from Mexico and claim independence. One day, in 1835, Will Travis, Davy Crockett, Jim Bowie, and I Fame, and over 100 other volunteers and regular soldiers came to defend the Alamo Mission in San Antonio from Mexico's Generalissimo Santa Anna. A massacre and a defeat for the defenders, this action led to the Battle of San Jacinto, in which the Mexicans were soundly beaten and Santa Anna was captured. The independent Republic of Texas was declared. By 1845, her experiment with nationhood was over and she joined the Union as a 28th state. The official slogan may be friendship before statehood. Yet one cannot but feel that for every true-born Texan, the real state motto would be the words which Sam Houston went into the battle in San Jacinto. Remember the Alamo. Statal pride is bigger here too. A cowboy state and an oil state, this image of Texas has continued right through history and through the 13-year run of the TV series Dallas. Oil is still important to the state, and in ways of which many Americans are not aware. Strategic reserves. Today I'm visiting the federal government's strategic petroleum reserves in Freeport, Texas, just 65 miles south of Houston, right on the Gulf of Mexico. In the mid-70s, America and the rest of the world got one hell of a shock when the oil-producing OPEC countries not only began to push up the price of oil, but also to embargo those nations that had traded with Israel. Rationing, mini rise, hyperinflation, the cost was disastrous, and the United States government vowed that such a calamity would never happen again. And so they planned for the construction of vast sites where oil could be stored against any future shortage that might imperil the good order of the Republic. There are 4 strategic petroleum reserve sites. All of them are sited along the Gulf of Mexico, and all of them employ the same technique for storing the oil. Essentially, the oil is pumped into huge salt domes, natural phenomena that have formed over millions of years. The oil replaces the natural brine within and can remain in its salty caverns in tip-top condition theoretically for eternity. Freeport is the largest of the US government's facilities, capable of holding over a quarter of a billion barrels at any one time. I'm allowed into Freeport's heart after a fretful hour and a half's wait in the most tigerishly fierce security area I have yet to visit in America. It took 10 minutes to get on board the USS Springfield nuclear submarine in Groton, Connecticut, but here they really mean business. For some reason, our director's name and passport number had not been sent ahead, and despite the security guards believing in our bona fides and the Freeport SPR press people being present to welcome us, we couldn't not enter until the mystery of the director's clearance was solved. He, poor man, got on the phone to Washington and had to try and speak to the Department of Homeland Security PR person who had his official security clearance details, and by a freak of good fortune he was wrongly put through to Alex, the very border patrol fellow who had escorted us to the Canadian border back in Montana weeks ago. Words were spoken, faxes and emails sent, and before another half of an hour had passed, we pierced the perimeter. However, the officer who was escorting us around the premises explained to me the difference between sour crude oil and sweet. Sweet has fewer impurities and can be converted into the gasoline cheaply, whereas sour needs to undergo extra refinement processes. Jorge even poured a flask of crude for me to inspect. Disgusting stuff. The smallest splash of it ruins clothes forever. What it does to the feathers of a seabird we know all too well from news footage of spills. And my dear, the smell! It is for these noxious, evil textured stuff that wars are fought and fortunes made. It is somehow fitting that the black gold that fuels our entire civilization is almost more disgusting than feces. Doing donuts. After an exhaustive and an exhausting tour, my taxi and I feel like expending some of that vile substance in the most childish and politically unacceptable manner imaginable. Freeport, I have discovered, is only a few miles from Quintana Beach, one of only two in all America in which one is allowed to drive a private road vehicle without restrictions. The taxi and I spend a happy half hour carrying huge donuts on the sand, and at one point I get a little overexcited and plow right into the surf. Huge quantities of salt water invade the bonnet. Only hope there won't be consequences. Some of you reading this are doubtlessly thinking that they would be fully deserved. All I can say in my defense is carbon offset, I promise, honest. Anyway, moving on. The gallery, it would be madness to cover the United States without having investigated a little more deeply than one usually does the phenomenon of the shopping mall. In Europe, we are used enough to these monstrous entities by now, but to visit one of the first and largest is nonetheless instructive. The Houston Galleria calls itself a city within a city. It has an ice rink, car parking for 14,400 shops, 11 beauty salons, and 2 hotels. Over 24 million people a year come here. It is the fourth largest mall in America and proudly caters for the high-end shopper with outlets including Neiman Marcus, Cartier, Gucci, Macy's, Tiffany's & Co., Saks Fifth Avenue, Louis Vuitton, Dior, Bulgari, and Nordstrom. And to make me happy, an Apple store. I wonder about under the enormous glass roofs in the delirious days. Two Texans in cowboy hats tell me that they And many friends come here just as you might to an art gallery, to look and to wonder. A proportion of the rich people who come regularly to the Galleria would count as members of Houston's social register. For all its good old boy image, Texas, like much of America, has its class system, its roster of the rich, ritzy, and respectable. To be fair to this elite, they almost only ever resemble en masse for the sake of charity. Gala. I have been invited this evening to a gala, pronounced as the same way the miners do gala, innate of the Houston Society for the Performing Arts. I arrive at the reception and I am immediately served a tumbler of enough whiskey to knock out a bison. The theme of the evening is the Great American Musical, and the women here have gone to great length to look sensational, glamorous in the American mode, a mode which involves a great deal of facial makeup and careful attention to hair. I cannot guess how many gallons of blonde colorant have been poured onto the assembled heads. Perhaps there is a strategic Clairol reserve in Houston. It has always struck me as bizarre that when in Europe American women should be so loud in their praise of the elegance and beauty of Parisians, and yet be able to go back home and do exactly this opposite. Plainness, simplicity, and restrained elegance are not to be numbered amongst the accomplishments of the rich Houstonian dame. I do not want to sound bitchy, however, they welcomed me with charm and warmth. The price for my supper is a small speech, which they receive very kindly. The ladies I sit with attend a dinner, ball, rout, gala of this kind at least once a week in this season. Endowment and philanthropy are enormously important. The rich are expected to choose at least 3 or 4 pet charities and to be extremely generous to them. The beneficiaries of this evening's party are a large number of institutions directly funded by the Society of Performing Arts. Any assumption that rich Texans are automatically Philistine, right-wing, and crass is instantly contradicted. These people value culture in all its forms, including the theater, whose practitioners often buy the hands that feed it. Honey, I plowed so much money into a play you would not believe. Wonderful young writer. But oh dear me, he does so hate us all. Yes, on one level you could look at the sea of dyed hair and blushed cheeks and listen to the tortured vowels of refined southern speech and cry, vulgar, self-satisfied, rich, vain. But you would be dishonest not to acknowledge also the unconditional generosity, open-mindedness, hard work, and charm which, with which these people live their highly privileged lives. How much easier America would be to understand if it conformed simply to all our snootiest, snobbiest, and most sneering expectations. Instead, it does conform, but not simply. It conforms with ambiguity, contradiction, and surprise. Maybe that is why I love it so. Border Patrol. The front line in America's war against illegal immigrants is the Mexican border. I came to El Paso, where many of the fiercest frontline battles in that war are daily fought. Mexico has influenced Texas hugely. Their respective cultures have combined to form a very particular style of Tex-Mex food, drink, music, and architecture. But while Mexican music, beer, and quesadillas may be welcomed in the United States, its people are less so. There is a class of vigilant volunteer who patrols the southern border of his own bat. Not officially sanctioned or funded, these people's vigils are fueled entirely by their personally felt enmity towards illegals and by what they would describe as their own patriotism. They call themselves the Minutemen, a title borrowed from the militias of the Revolutionary Wars, who declared themselves ready to face the enemy, in that case the British, at a minute's notice. Joined Minuteman Shannon in the frontier town of Fabens. about an hour from El Paso. He drives us along the borderline in his pickup, pointing out places where illegals are known to try and cross. Every now and again he passes a genuine government border patrol vehicle. They're all friendly terms, Shannon assures us, for the federal agents who know the Minutemen are law-abiding and would never tackle an illegal immigrant themselves. They would radio the information to the proper authorities. Are there British patriots who are so incensed by illegal immigration into the United Kingdom that they would set up their own border patrols in like manner? Shannon strikes me as more sad and lonely than dangerous. He has that slightly obnoxious and overstated pride in his obedience to the law and his respect for proper authorities characteristic of the self-righteous patriot. I ask him whether he has any sympathy for the Mexicans whose lives are so poor and who look out daily across the river to a land of riches and plenty. He evades the question by referring once more to the law. Incidentally, I say that the Mexicans look out over a river, and it may be that you already know that I am referring to the Rio Grande, which for much of its course forms the natural border between America and Mexico. Illegal immigrants are often called wetbacks on account of their having to swim that river. You may imagine my surprise when Shannon showed me the Rio Grande. Not a river at all, but a drain, a dry ditch. Further along it swells into a small stream, and I'm told, but here it is no more than a trickle. The following day I joined the official United States Border Patrol in the city of El Paso itself. Agent Romero drives me along the fences on the US side of the border, and we see over the dribble that it is the Rio Grande. Mexicans in the city of Juarez gazing across at us. Helicopters fly overhead and we pass dozens and dozens of other border patrol vehicles. The budget for this level of security must be colossal. There were a few moments of high-intensity action when we are sped towards spots where illegals are actually crossing, according to our in-car shortwave radio. We arrived at one place in time to see a pair of elderly Mexicans being led away. Often, Agent Romero tells me, they will be paid to try a bold and ridiculous crossing in order to create a diversion that is cover from a more serious incursion somewhere else along the frontier. As often as people, it is drugs that are smuggled across. I asked him the same question I asked Minuteman Shannon. Does he, as a Latin American especially, feel any sympathy for those trying to get in? He returns the same answer. It's the law. They must not break the law. If the law was different, I would feel different, he eventually confides. A very old thing for a free man human being to say, in my opinion, but I suppose a government agent being filmed is not, in the usual sense, free. Illegal immigration has become a huge issue in America, but as it has in Britain, and because he feels that if he is caught on camera expressing even the smallest degree of understanding of fellow feeling, his job will be forfeit. I climb into a skybox, a preposterous, hydraulically lifted mobile sentry box in which the poor engine tasked to it has to stay for 8-hour shifts. At the side of the river lie the two enormous cities of El Paso and Juarez, and I can see them clearly from my high voltage point. The difference in prosperity is all too apparent. The only way to stop people wanting to migrate from Juarez to El Paso, it seems to me, is for Mexico to become as prosperous as the United States. In recent years, Mexico's economy has grown, certainly, and it continues to expand at an unprecedented rate. Perhaps the day will come when it is American illegals who try to swim the Rio Grande. Not in my life, I think, but perhaps one day. Since Montana and the Canadian border, I have trailed the Rocky Mountains southwards. It is here, at the end, in the pass, El Paso, where their southern journey through Mexico as the Sierra Madre begins. I sit in an old cantina, sipping Mexican beer and being treated to Mexican music, and I contemplate the next leg of my journey, which will take me back north, as far north as America goes. The frozen seas of the Alaskan Arctic seem a long way away, the warmth of southern Texas.